This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so welcome back to the session, guys. Today, so in the previous session, we discussed about little bit information about the XML. I mean, XML holds the data, and I try to compare between plain data and the XML data. Okay, quick, quick. I will try to show you the example, whatever we discussed yesterday, and quickly go to the next part of the discussion. Okay, if you see, yesterday we discussed about example 1 and example 2. This is the plain data and we want to create it as XML. When we saw the XML example contains open tag and close tag. Between open tag and close tag, we can have the data. Between open tag and close tag, we can have the data. Okay. And the tag, something we wrote in the tag as XYZ, this is completely user defined keyword. Okay. So you can write anything, but it is in our hand whether we want to write a meaningful keyword or whether we want to write some XYZ value. Okay, so if you write a meaningful keyword that is helpful to the data, that becomes metadata of your actual data. Okay, so that is what I mean. If you take the second example, student age is 15 years. 15 is the data here. Okay, and what is 15? It's age of a student. It is age of a student. So you can write anything, but anything in the tag or element name, but it is in your control whether you want to go with a meaningful keyword or any keyword, a random keyword. It's your choice. The rule is element tag name is user defined keyword. Okay, just remember the rule. Element tag name is user defined keyword. It is completely in our hand whether we want to go for a meaningful keyword or some random keyword. It's completely our choice. Okay, so this is what we discussed in the previous session. So let me continue on top of it. Okay, so when we are talking about XML, to build a proper XML, I want to build a proper XML. Okay, proper XML. So in that case, there are few rules we need to follow. Rule number 1, XML document must be well-formed document. I will tell you what is this well-formed. Okay, XML document must be well-formed, and your XML document must be valid. So what is this well-formed? What is this valid? We need to see as part of the session. Okay, so let me give you complete introduction. What is this well-formed? What is valid? How complex an XML we can prepare. Okay, we saw only how to write an element. Yesterday we saw the syntax for an element, right? How an element looks like. It has an open tag. Open tag has some user-defined keyword. User-defined keyword. Okay, and there must be some data. There must be some data, and there is a close tag. There is a close tag which starts with a slash. Close tag. Okay, this is how an element looks like, a basic syntax of an element. Okay, so but this is not just XML. An element is not, if you write an element, it's not the XML. Okay, you need to, there are so many other things as well. When we are writing an XML, there are 3 types of elements we will prepare. Okay, we call it as simple element. Number 2, complex element. Okay, number 3, attribute. If you take one XML document, guys, that XML document contains collection of elements. One XML document contains collection of elements. Okay, Okay. One XML document contains collection of elements, and that collection of elements contains these three types of elements. That element can be a simple typed element, it can be a complex type element, it can be an attribute. I will tell you the example as well. Okay. Suppose I have some plain data. I have some data, something like this. Okay. Order ID, order number is 2001. This is my plain data. I want to write it in XML format. I want to write this information. This is the information I have. This information I want to write in XML format. How I can write? I should have an open tag, and the data I should have a close tag. So in the open tag, I want to give meaningful information, meaningful tag name. Of course, technically you can write any user-defined keyword, but I want to write a meaningful keyword. I will say order ID, and the close tag should be same as open tag, order ID. So now what happened? Now what
So
happened? The
data is
order ID.
2001, sir.
Okay, data is 2001 as per the given statement. As per the given statement, data is 2001. And what is this 2001? It is order ID. So this is a simple data, plain data we have, and I converted into XML. Suppose, let me take another example. Okay, student ID is 201, and his name is Raj. Okay, if you observe this data, there are two data parts. 201 is the number, Raj is his name. So there are two parts. In this case, if you write XML, it looks like this. Okay, so first thing is there are two data parts, so two elements required. In one element we can write only one data. In one element we can write only one data. So here in our statement we have two data parts, two data sections. So I want to prepare two elements. Okay, I will say stuid 201, close the tag stuid, and then stu name. What is the student name? Raj. Okay, and then stu name. Okay, so guys, here in our example there are two parts. 201 and Raj. So I need two elements. But guys, in an XML there is one basic rule when we are writing an XML. Every XML starts with open tag and closes with closed tag, ends with closed tag. I will repeat the point. Every XML starts with open tag, close with end tag. Okay, close with end tag or end with close tag. Now, if you see here, I have an element. Here I can see open tag. This is open tag. Okay, is my mouse visible for you? Mouse cursor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if you see this, the open tag, this is open tag. Okay, our rule is working, but this open tag is closed here itself, correct? This open tag is closed here itself. Okay, student ID open, student ID closed. That means, but what is our rule? As for our rule, XML elements starts open tag a document should starts with an open tag, document should close with a close tag. Okay, that means I must have an element like this. Let's say student. Okay, completely user defined keyword, guys. No need to be student, you can write ABC as well. But just to give meaningful representation, I'm using proper keywords. Student. Okay, see, this is now if you observe the example, earlier example, and now let me write two examples. If I write like this, Consider this is example, this is example A, this is example B. Observe the difference between these two. We have a plain statement, we have a data, and the data, this statement contains two data parts. One is student ID and another is student name. I am trying to convert the statement into XML format. When I try to convert the statement into XML format, I need to write two elements because of two data parts. But when we are writing two elements, it is mandatory to maintain a root element. When we have more than one element, it is mandatory to maintain a grouping element. Grouping. This way we cannot write an XML. You cannot write two individual elements. You need to group them. I grouped them with the student element. Is it clear? Any questions? You can unmute and speak if you have a question. Okay. If we have more than one element, our plain data contains more than one data part. That means we need to prepare more than one element. If we have more than one element, we should maintain a grouping element. So what is the grouping element here? What is the grouping element? Student is the grouping element. Okay. So I grouped these two elements under student. Again, this is also an element. See, this is open tag and this one is close tag. In between open tag and close tag, I inserted collection of elements. Okay. So guys, if you see this example, in this example, student is called as complex element. Student is called as complex element. Student ID, student name called as simple element. Student ID, student name are called as simple element. I will give you a little description here. Okay. So what is a simple element? It contains data between
open tag and close.
Open and close tags. Okay. What is complex element? Complex element is it contains collection of elements between open and close tag. Are we good? So you understand the difference between simple element and complex element? So this is a simple element. If you have more than one simple element, it is mandatory to have a complex element. Any questions? If you have more than one simple element, it is mandatory. You need to maintain a complex element. Again, the basic rule of the element will not change. Element tag is user defined keyword. Anything you can write. So do I need to write only student? Can I write like this? The same example, I want to write in this way, ABC. Okay, close tag ABC. In between ABC, I want to write student name and student age. Is it allowed? Not allowed? Is this allowed? Not allowed?
Allowed, sir. Yes, allowed.
It is allowed. It is allowed. That's what the rule we are talking about. Okay. The tag name is user defined, but it is suggestible to have a meaningful keyword. That's it. Instead of having ABC XYZ, you can give a meaningful keyword. Okay. So hope you understand what is simple element. Okay. Hope you understand what is simple element and what is complex element. So any questions, guys? Please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, if no questions, I will go to the next point. You are all clear? Okay. So now we understand what is a complex element and what is a simple element. Okay. So now let me add little more information here. Suppose the same example I am writing in another way. Same example I want to write in another way. See this? We have one complex element and two simple elements, correct? So guys, attribute works like a simple element. Attribute works like a simple element with a different syntax. Attribute works like a simple element, but with a different syntax. I will show you the syntax. See, in the student element, one single space, STUID is equal to 201. Instead of writing attribute as an element, I wrote attribute like this. Student ID is equal to 201. Okay. See the syntax. In an existing element, student is an element. Student is an element in an existing element with a white space. White space is the differentiator. I can write an attribute. The syntax of an attribute is you don't need to write any tags here. Tag is not required. Directly you write student ID is equal to the value of the student ID within double quotes. Okay. So example C, example D, both are giving same data, same information. Okay. It is your choice whether we want to go with attribute or we want to go with simple element. Any questions? It is just our choice. We want to go with simple element or we want to go with attribute. Okay, so I will give you another example. Suppose we can write more data here. I will say city of the student. I will say HYD. See what happened in this example. Student is the complex element. Student ID is the attribute. City is an attribute. Student name is a simple element. Okay, can I write this example in another way? I want to write the same example in another way. Okay, I don't want to maintain student ID as an attribute. I want to maintain student ID as a simple element. Is it allowed? Not allowed? You should tell me. Is it allowed?
Allowed, sir. Is it?
Okay.
Yes, sir. Allowed.
Yeah. So guys, in an XML, you can have just one simple element if you want, or you can have more than one simple element. If you have more than one simple element, it is mandatory to have a grouping element, which is nothing but complex element. Okay. So this is, in our example, student is the complex element. Next point is attribute. So attribute, we can use attribute as an alternative to simple element. Attribute holds the data. Simple element also holds the data, but their syntax is different. Attribute syntax is different. Simple element syntax is different. Attribute we will write in open tag of an element. You can write attribute in open tag of an element. Suppose the same example I want to write in another way. Suppose I don't want to write student ID here, but I want to write the student ID inside student name as a attribute. Is it allowed? Not allowed? Is it allowed? Not allowed? Tell me.
Allowed. Not allowed, sir.
It is allowed. Student ID. You can write attribute inside open tag of any element. You can write attribute inside open tag of any element.
Okay, okay, sir.
And we can have more than one attribute in each element. See this example. In this example, I have two attributes. Correct? I have two attributes, but only the white space is the separator. If you see here I have one white space. Here I have one white space. Okay, white space is the separator. You can separate attributes with a white space. You can write any number of attributes in open tag of one element. Any questions till now? Any questions?
No, no, sir. Got it.
No. If you see this, when you are writing one XML document, that document contains simple elements, complex elements, and attributes. Simple element means data there will be data between open and closed tags. Okay. Complex element means there will be collection of elements between open and closed tags. So in our current example, if you take the current example, any one example, let me take this one. Let me take this example, example D. Okay. What is the name of the complex element here? Unmute and speak. What is the name of the complex element here? Everybody, please unmute.
Student.
Student name, sir.
Student name or student? Complex
Student, sir.
element.
Only student.
Complex element. Student is the complex element. In this example,
Okay, sir.
student is the complex element. What is the simple element here? Simple element.
Raj. Student name.
Student name, STU name.
Student
No,
name.
not Raj. See the difference. See, when you are start speaking, you are talking wrong answers, right? So you should speak, guys. You should speak. If you don't speak, you will say wrong answers. You should listen, follow, and respond. Okay. So there are multiple things we are talking about. I'm talking about different keywords. Simple element is one keyword. Complex element is one keyword. Attribute is one keyword. And we are also talking about something called data. Something called data. Okay. In this exam, 4 keywords: data, simple element, complex element, attribute. Please differentiate it. In this example, what is a complex element?
Student.
What is a simple element?
STU name.
STU name. What is an attribute?
STU ID.
STU ID. STU ID is the attribute.
STUID
Now tell me,
attribute.
now tell me, what is the data of student name? What is the
Raj.
data of student name? Raj. Student name is Raj. Data is Raj. What is the data of student ID?
201.
201. Guys, you are following, right? So make sure what is the question, what is the answer for that question. Okay, terminology is very important when we are talking about some technology. Okay, here we learned 4 keywords: data, simple element, complex element, attribute. Okay, 4 keywords we learned. And any questions till now for these 4 keywords: data, simple element, complex element, and attribute? Okay, no questions. Shall I go to the next point? Okay, so now if you see, we learned few points about XML, right? We learned what is data, what is simple element, what is complex element, and what is attribute. Now let's come back to this one, proper XML. I want to prepare proper XML. How we can prepare proper XML? If you want to prepare one proper XML document, one correct XML document, that document must be well formed, and the document must be valid. If the document achieves these 2 rules, then it is called proper XML, a good XML. Okay. Now, what we need to do to make an XML as well formed? What we need to do to make an XML as valid? Okay. Okay, let's see what I mean by well-formed XML first. Okay. Let me move this to other view. Okay, so now I'm talking about well-formed XML. How we can make an XML as well-formed XML? How we can make an XML as well-formed XML? Okay, so the rule number 1, guys, these are all the rules, syntactical rules. Okay, syntax. What syntax we need to follow? What are all the syntax rules we need to follow when we are creating well-formed XML? Okay, so the rule number 1 is processing instruction. Processing instruction. See, every XML document starts with a processing instruction. It is a fixed statement, guys. It is a fixed statement, and this is the fixed syntax. Okay, XML version equal to 1.0. encoding equal to UTF-8. So this is a standard fixed statement when you are writing any XML document. Okay. So in the other document, I want to maintain one example to make you clear. Okay. Let's assume this is one XML document. Okay. The right side one, I want to prepare an example for you. I want to prepare an example here. So I want to write an XML. What is the first line of the document? It is fixed every time. The first line of the document contains processing instruction. Okay. Next, it is a fixed statement. Okay. So here the version represents the version of XML language. So as of now, we have only one version of XML language, which is 1.0. We don't have the second version. Maybe in future, we may get 1.1, 1.2, 2.0. See, Java has versions, right? Java 3, Java 4, like that, right? So even XML also we can expect versions, but as of now we have only one version, that is 1.0. Maybe going forward we will see different versions of XML. Okay, and encoding is, this is for systems understandability. According to the operating system, whatever we wrote in English, these all are English, right? That will be converted into machine understandable language. For that, your machine will utilize it. We'll talk about it little later. For now, just use the same encoding model, but there are not just UTF-8, there are so many other encoding models also available. UTF-8, UTF-16, even Windows compatible encoding models, Linux compatible encoding models. There are so many available. At this point, not really we need to stress on this. Okay, now, this is rule number one. Rule number two, element open tag is a user defined keyword. User defined keyword. This is what we already discussed. Correct? Element open tag is a user defined keyword. This we already discussed. Next, element close tag must be same as open tag. Okay, when you are writing an element, open tag is user defined. Close tag must be same as open tag. That means if I take an example, S name. I'm just instead of writing STU name, I'm writing S name. Okay, Sai. Close tag must be S name. Okay, so open tag and close tag are different. Then it is not a proper XML. This is not a well-formed XML. See here, open tag and close tag are different. This is not well-formed XML. So open tag, close tag must be same. Okay, now go to the next rule. Complex element must be closed at the complex element must be closed after subelements. Complex element must be closed after subelements. Okay, I mean, suppose let's say I have S name and I have SID. I have two simple elements. We must maintain when we have more than one element, we must maintain a grouping element, which is nothing but complex element. Correct? So complex element must be closed after closing your subelement. So here the subelement, student ID is one subelement, student name is one subelement. Okay, but there is, see, under here observe, there is a new keyword I introduced, subelement. Okay, we never discussed about this subelement. Okay, sir, what do you mean by subelement? Subelement means nested element. See, student is the main first element. It contains SID and S name, which are subelements. Here. Okay, subelement is not a prescribed keyword, but just for our understanding, I'm saying this complex element contains subelements, and the subelements are SID and S name. SID and S name are simple elements in this example. Any questions? Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. So subelement no need to be just a simple element. When I said sub-element, it's no need to be just a simple element. I mean, your sub-element may be a simple element, sub-element may be a complex element. I will do the changes in this example. Let's see. In this example, I'm adding something called address, city, and state. City and state. Okay. Address, city, and state. If you see this example, total how many elements we have in this example? Student is one element, SID second element, SNAME third element, address fourth element, city fifth element, state sixth element. There are total 6 elements in this example. 6 elements. Out of 6 elements, student is a complex element because in between open tag and close tag, you can see collection of sub-elements. Student is a complex element. Why? Because in between open tag and close tag, you can see collection of sub-elements. Okay. SID, is it a simple element or complex element? SID. Speak out, please. It's a simple element.
Simple element.
How about SNAME? Simple element or complex element? This is also simple element. This is also simple element. Okay. How about address?
Complex
element.
Is complex element. Why? Why it is a complex element? Because in between open tag and close tag, you can see
we have a
collection of sub-elements. That's what I'm saying. Sub-element is not just a simple element. Sub-element, sometimes it's a complex element as well. If you take the example of student is a complex element. It has sub-elements. SID sub-element, SNAME is a sub-element, address is a sub-element of student. Student element contains 3 sub-elements: SID, SNAME, address. Address element also a complex element. It contains 2 sub-elements. They are city and state. Any question? Any question as of now? So now you understand what is simple element, what is complex element, and how a sub-element looks like. Sub-element can be a simple element, sub-element can be a complex element. Are we good? I mean, XML allows nested complex elements. XML allows nested complex elements. Okay, there is no limit like this. How many levels of nested elements are allowed? There is no limit. You can write any number of complex element at any level. Any questions as of now?
No, sir.
No? Okay. So sub-element, I will change the statement, can be a complex element or simple element. Okay. Sub-element can be a complex element or a simple element. Both. Okay. Collection. It's a collection. Right? In the current example, there are 2 complex elements. Student is one complex element. Address is one complex element. What are the sub-elements of student? There are 3 sub-elements: SID, SNAME, address. SID simple element, SNAME simple element, address is complex element. Okay, this is for student. Suppose if I talk about address is a complex element which contains 2 sub-elements. City is a sub-element, state is a sub-element. City is simple element, state is simple element. Any questions? Shall I go to the next point? Okay. Right. So the next thing, guys, when you are writing a tag name, okay, city, state, address, see, you cannot use white space. You cannot use white space as part of your tag name. Suppose SID, I cannot write like this. S space ID, I cannot write like this. So this syntax is meant for attribute, not for element. Even though if you write like this, Close tag and open tag are same, but this is a wrong syntax. This is a wrong syntax. White spaces are not allowed. White space is not allowed as part of tag name. Okay, remember, never use white space as part of tag name. Okay, so you must not use white space. Of course, if you want, you can use camel letters. Suppose SID. Here I can write SID. Okay, so to differentiate the keywords, suppose you want to differentiate the keywords within the tag name, use the camel letter. Every first letter of the word, use the camel letter. Okay, suppose here if you see STU name, but don't use white space here. Okay, and at the same time, make sure to follow all the rules. Okay, next thing, we can have one or multiple attributes in any element open tag. We can have one or multiple attributes in any element open tag, only in open tag, sir. We don't write attributes in closed tag. Let's say I want to write pin code. I want to write pin code in this example. First option is you can write pin code as a simple element, not an issue in that. Okay, you can write pin code as a simple element. Okay, or I'm not interested to write as a simple element. I can write it as an attribute as well. But only the thing is you need to follow the syntax and the value must be in double quotes. Okay, some pin code value must be in double quotes. And this is an attribute. See, element tag, this is element tag and this is attribute. Element tag and attribute separated with a white space. So don't use the white space to separate the tag names. Okay, it is a separator between tag name and the attribute, and you can have more than one attribute as well. In an example, you can have any number of attributes, and in one element you can write more than one attribute. Okay, now the next point, one or multiple XMLs are allowed in one document, but we must maintain root element. I mean, suppose if you see this is one XML, right? Student is an XML. Let me write another XML called parent. Okay, another XML called parent. Father Ravi, mother Sita. Okay, now if you see this document, there are two XMLs. Student is one XML, parent is one XML. Multiple XMLs you can write in one document. See, this new 4 is one document. Right? One notepad file. I have one notepad file. In this notepad file, I have two XMLs, student and parent. But what is mandatory? We must maintain a root element. Even though you have multiple XMLs, you must group them under one root element. This is nothing but a complex element again, correct? When you have more than one XML, it is mandatory to maintain a root element. I will say XYZ as my root element. Is it allowed or not? XYZ as my close tag. So is it allowed or not allowed, sir?
Allowed.
Allowed. It is allowed. So I have more than one XML, but it is not allowed to use them individually. We should keep them under a root element. Of course, it is a complex element. XYZ is a complex element. Are we good? If you are in a situation to use more than one XML in one document, okay, you should remember you must have a root element. Without root element, you cannot write this document. It will be syntactically wrong. Okay. And the last rule is we must save XML document. We must save XML document with .xml extension. We must save XML document with .xml extension. That means this document, if I want to save it, I will save it like, let me save on my desktop. I will say, I will save it in this folder. Okay. I will say example1 XML document. Example1 XML document. What is the extension? XML. Extension must be XML. Okay. And I am using all types here to save the document, all types. And the extension is .xml. Let me save it. Now, if you observe this, guys, now if you observe this, what is the extension of the document? .xml. Extension of the document is .xml. Any questions till now? Any questions? If you, no questions, speak out, guys. Unmute and speak out if you have any question. Okay, fine. So if we are able to follow all these rules while creating one XML document, if you are following all these rules, that XML is called as well-formed XML. Any questions? Any questions? No? Okay. So we understand what is the well-formed XML. Okay. To prepare a proper XML, our XML should be well-formed. Our XML should be valid. So both the rules we need to follow. So anyway, we discussed about the first one, how to prepare a well-formed XML. It is nothing but we need to follow collection of syntax rules. That's it. If you follow collection of syntax rules, that is called well-formed XML. What is valid XML? We'll see. That's a separate section. We'll talk about it. But now I covered well-formed XML. In today's session, I covered what is well-formed XML. If you have any question, unmute and speak. No? Fine. So that's it in this session, guys.